It's time for our SEC Conference Championship predictions, and there are a lot of teams in the SEC who have a lot of hype surrounding them. You got Auburn, LSU, South Carolina, Alabama, Oklahoma, Florida. But out of those teams, South Carolina honestly has one of the easier schedules. They do pull off a couple really big wins, which is what gets them into that conference championship game. But I think this is going to be a surprise to a lot of people because we didn't necessarily hop on the South Carolina hype train to say as having them as one of the best teams in the country and necessarily better than all of these teams that they're ahead of in the standings. The games that we predicted kind of just fell into place, and South Carolina ended up in the SEC championship. And it is honestly a pretty realistic possibility given how we predicted the season.
And the really interesting thing to note here is that South Carolina is in the conference championship game, not because of our prediction of Alabama losing the Iron Bowl to Auburn, but it's actually Oklahoma pulling off the upset against LSU in the last game of the year. If LSU manages to get that win, they are going up against Texas in the SEC championship game. But we will get back to that SEC championship game a little bit later. As for Alabama and LSU, they just have really tough schedules. LSU has a really tough non-conference schedule as well, opening the year off with Clemson. And it's just going to be a really hard year for these two teams, but they have the talent and the teams to pull off some of these big wins. I think we might have been a little bit lower on LSU earlier on when we did their prediction video. I'm starting to like them a little bit more now. I think the defense has made some strides forward, but given the fact that their schedule is so difficult, I think it's still pretty likely that we will see this team at 9-3, hoping for some chaos to maybe make it into the college football playoffs if some things go their way, but that will be a very unlikely scenario.
And I think one of the other surprising things here is the fact that we do have Georgia finishing 9-3 this season. Two of those losses in SEC play, Alabama and Texas getting the best of the Bulldogs, and then the shocking one, the non-conference loss in their rivalry game, Week 13 against Georgia Tech. This seems to be a popular pick for some people. We had it at the very start of the season. I think Georgia Tech is going to be a really good team this year. And this could potentially cost Georgia a playoff spot. You'll have to come back on August 19th when we release our college football playoff predictions. These next two teams here at 5-3, I think are both going to be potential dark horses in the SEC this year, but they have a really tough schedule. So making the conference championship is going to be a very, very steep uphill battle. Oklahoma, though, bringing in two of the best transfer portal players in the class with John Matier from Washington State and Jaden Ott from California to be their starting quarterback and running back, respectively. I think the Sooners are going to be a very, very good team this season and potentially compete for an SEC title if they can pull off some major, major upsets. And then you got Florida. We personally really like DJ Lagway. And if you look at that Georgia game last year, had he not gone down, the Gators very likely would have won that game. I think this season, if he can stay healthy, they're going to have an incredible year, which leads them to finish the year in the top half of the conference here, tied with Oklahoma.
And DJ Lagway is the biggest reason why we have them up here. I know we try to be different than a lot of other analysts, but Joel Klatt said it best in his top 25 ranking. Florida has the potential to be a top 10 team in the country when DJ Lagway is healthy, but he's been dealing with some injuries this offseason. And if he's not able to play at 100%, then we can see Florida slip down these rankings a little bit. But we are banking on the fact that Lagway will be healthy for the full year and will be able to lead Florida through this difficult schedule.
The next tier is the Texas A&M tier, also known as the perennial 8-4 team, and we have them finishing 500 in conference. And if you look at their projected record, funny enough, it is exactly 8-4, which seems to be the record that Texas A&M finishes every single season with. I would be pretty surprised if they didn't this season. They have a lot of off-season hype. There's some tough games on the schedule that they are very likely to lose and that ends up putting them in this tie with Auburn in the conference record, but they do end up winning a tiebreaker.
And Auburn
like Texas A&M has a lot of offseason hype, but given how difficult their schedule is and how young the team is that they're bringing in from the transfer portal, I do think they're probably a year or two out from really living up to that hype and competing once again in the SEC. So I think this is likely where we'll end up seeing them in the middle of the conference standings, but still going to a bowl game along with Vanderbilt and Ole Miss, who come in at 3-5 in the conference, but the same record as Auburn. And for Vandy, it's because they have so much returning production, both on offense and on defense. Diego Pavia back as the starting quarterback, along with his favorite target in Eli Stowers at the tight end position. And a lot of the defense is also returning. It just comes down to can they be super productive? They weren't one of the best defenses last year, but if they're able to build on the development they had last season, then maybe Vandy can be this good and get to 7, maybe 8 wins. And then Ole Miss is kind of the opposite. They just have a really good coaching staff with a couple of very good recruits, like Austin Simmons in his first season as the starting quarterback. Lane Kiffin is going to dial up a great game plan for him to succeed, despite the fact that they have lost so many of their best players, like Jackson Dart, like Trey Harris, and like a good amount of that defense. I would be shocked if Ole Miss misses out on a bowl game. I think we are very low on Ole Miss compared to the rest of the college football world, but with the amount of production that they have lost, I do think it's a pretty realistic expectation for them to regress quite a bit.
Then this next tier, it really could go either way. I could see both Arkansas and Tennessee doing much better than this prediction, but both teams have a lot of uncertainty. For Tennessee, it's really on the offense. Only three starters returning. You had the whole Nico Iamaleava saga this offseason. I think that really, despite having a good coaching staff, it's kind of going to fall apart for the Volunteers this year. I don't think it'll be a permanent thing. They should be back to normal in 2026. But for now, I think it's going to be a bit of an off year for Tennessee. And then you look at Arkansas, you have a really good returning quarterback in Talon Green, but they have a tough schedule. And that's why I think it's going to be really hard for them to even make a bowl game, which we do have them doing. But finishing higher up in the SEC is going to be near impossible for the Razorbacks this year. And then the bottom three teams, I think, are all pretty self-explanatory. Kentucky and Missouri, I would put above Mississippi State by a decent margin. I really like Zach Calzada, who transferred into Kentucky. I just think they have a really, really hard schedule. Missouri also had a really good transfer portal class, but we thought that they were very overrated last season, and losing a lot of their older players, I think, is going to hurt this team a lot this season. Despite having a good projected record, we have them finishing a lot lower than that as far as our actual predictions.
And then, to no one's surprise, Mississippi State finds themselves in last place in the conference standings, going winless once again. Now, they do have a starting quarterback returning in Blake Shapen, who did deal with a injury last year and wasn't able to play for most of the season, but his return does make Mississippi State a little bit more competitive. It just so happens that their schedule is very difficult, and the teams that they might have a better chance against all happen to be road games. So I really don't see the Bulldogs managing to get a win in the conference or getting more than 3 wins overall. So they find themselves at the bottom of the standings.
Now we move back up to the top of the standings to talk about this conference championship game between Texas and South Carolina. It's really just a battle of young quarterbacks. Lenoris Sellers has more starting experience for South Carolina, and I think he's going to have a very solid season this year. But Arch Manning has much more hype around him. After being a backup to Quinn Ewers for multiple seasons, he is finally getting his turn. And despite losing an early game to Ohio State, they finished the year on an 11-game win streak heading into this conference championship game. Texas is definitely the hotter of the two teams. And I think that overall, they are the more talented team. South Carolina is going to be really good this year, but this conference is Texas's to lose. The Longhorns are going to get this win in the conference championship game. And I do think that it will actually be in, I won't say dominant fashion, but it's definitely going to be a convincing win that solidifies a first round bye for the Longhorns in the playoffs. But as far as where that spot is, you're going to have to come back and check out our college football playoff predictions, like I mentioned earlier, on August 19th.
Jonas hit most of the key points. This really can be an interesting game, but I do think Texas, given that they were in the playoffs last year and have a lot more experience, are going to be able to get the better of South Carolina in such a big game. South Carolina has a bunch of playmakers, especially on the defensive side. Their defensive line was one of the best in college football last year, but they have lost some of those contributors. So they will have to see if they can generate a good enough pass rush similar to what they had last year, especially against a mobile quarterback like Arch Manning. But for Texas, they have one of the best defenses in college football. Steve Sarkisian is an absolute master of using the transfer portal to his advantage, not to mention having so many good recruits coming in as well. It really is Texas's conference to lose at this point. I do think Georgia's reign as the undisputed SEC champ is going to come to an end this year. I do think the Longhorns will finally take the throne as the top dog in the SEC this season. So thank you guys for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more of our videos, and we will see you in the next one.